Welcome everyone to our fifth virtual artist talk in our new series, presented as part of Nexicom Presents Fourth Line Theatre at Home and our Epic Women's Directing Project, which focuses on the lives and careers of Canadian women working in theatre. I am so excited to spend some time today with the amazing Jani Lauzon. But before I do, I just have a few things to note. First off, I want to acknowledge our season sponsors, Nexicom, for their continued support of Fourth Line Theatre, and to Exit Realty LiftLock as our major sponsor, and Supporting Roles Interactive Training Incorporated for being the sponsor of our Epic Women's Directing Project. Thank you all. Just some housekeeping notes. I want to let you know that your audio is muted, and if you'd like to submit a question to Jani or myself, we'd be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A session after the talk. To answer a question, simply click on the Q&A button on the menu at the bottom of your Zoom video window. You can type the question and Lindy, our host, will collect them and give them to us during the Q&A session. Also, please be aware that if you happen to exit the webinar by mistakenly or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter the webinar by clicking on the Zoom invite link we sent you, and you'll get back the same way you arrived. Be sure to follow our social media, our e-blasts, and visit our website to register for our upcoming events. This Friday and every Friday in August, we'll be hosting our Festival Fridays Farmers Market at the picturesque Winslow Farm in Millbrook. We also invite you to join us at the Winslow Farm next Wednesday, August 5th, as well as August 12th and 18th at 8 a.m. for early morning distanced yoga sessions outside. Call our box office to reserve your spot. I'm also excited to host my next artist talk on Tuesday, August 25th at 7 p.m. when I will be talking with Toronto-based performer, producer, director, creator, and activist for stage and screen, the amazing Sedna Fiati, who also has worked at Fourth Line Theatre a few times, and visit our website to follow our e-newsletter to register. You can also visit Fourth Line Theatre's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events after the live presentation. And now I would like to introduce Jani Lauzon. Hello.
I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
Many buttons to push. I'm like, where is it?
Ah! I know. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I feel so lucky to have time to chat with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much. So tell me, first of all, where are you right now?
I am in my home in Toronto, and I'm lucky to have this beautiful room with lots of light and a beautiful cathedral ceiling. Currently, I just rid myself of my upstairs roommates, which were a family of raccoons, so I've got the place back to myself.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness. Well, I love that the entire room is white. You have white hair and a white top, and then your beams match that beautiful necklace you're wearing.
Oh, thank you.
You're very organized.
Yes,
So I just want to dive right in. Okay, so Wikipedia could be wrong, but Wikipedia says you were born in the East and raised in the East Kootenays in British Columbia. Is that true?
I was, yeah. I was born in Kimberley, BC, and raised in Kimberley and Cranbrook. Between my biological family and my foster family, I stayed in that area until I graduated from high school. And then I took a plane, bus, and thumbed across the United States to a little place called South Paris, Maine, to study mime and mask and circus technique.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna put what is it called again in Maine? What is the town in Maine?
It's called South Paris, Maine. And at the time it was I think maybe 60 people, but a man named Tony Montanaro, who was an Italian clown and mime and circus performer, had a barn there that he transformed into a school. And we worked there. So there was a small theater and a training room in the bottom of the theater, and then in the barn, and then the upstairs was like a communal place. Everybody had a place on the floor, and we cooked meals together. It was great.
Okay, so I have to wind back. How does a young human being from the East Kootenays, from Kimberley and Cranbrook, how do you hear about a place like that?
Well, I was really lucky because both my biological parents were very creative, and my foster parents were also very creative. So my foster father was my high school drama teacher. He also ran the community theater. And so I got to be backstage looking at people like Brent Carver and Randy Birch and a whole pile of really incredible artists before me grow up in the theater. So I learned about the Celebration Mime Theater actually through Randy, who is an actor in Calgary, and at the time had a company called the Arete Mime Company with Kevin McKendrick and Don. I can't remember Don's last name. So I was in conversation with Randy. I said, I want to study physical theater is really what I wanted to do. And I was very inspired by a lot of companies coming out of Montreal and Vancouver, Carbon 14 and Axis Mime and San Francisco Mime Theater. Really interested in the idea of creating imagery in theater. And Randy had suggested the school, and I applied and I got in. So
you're in Cranbrook and you know about all of these companies in Montreal and in California?
Well, you know, I had a really great opportunity as a young high school student to be surrounded by, again, these incredible theater artists who were out in the world working, who had these kinds of connections, who I could turn to. And I also had the support of my foster family, who really believed that being an artist was an honor and a great thing to aspire to. So, you know, I was encouraged to try to develop a clear picture of what it was that I wanted to accomplish and then find ways of doing it. So I was very, very lucky. I was lucky I landed in a great place, and I was lucky to have that kind of support.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I always forget that Brent is from Cranbrook, right? Brent Carver is from Cranbrook.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating to me. So first time, I guess I want to know about first time you ever went on stage. What was it in, or what form was it in? And then I also want to know about in that early period of your life, a really pivotal, something you saw on stage.
Right. Okay. Oh, wow. You know, those are such great questions. So I did a lot of community theater. I was very interested in theater at a very early age. So all throughout my high school, I was on stage doing stuff or backstage helping with props. And then I would say that a good portion of my early career was actually a lot of street performance, circus, clown, mime, mask work. After I came from the Celebration Mime Theater, I came to Toronto and continued studying in that vein. And so did a lot of street performance, and also worked with some friends of mine, Trish Leeper, Sheila Crampton, Rob Mills. We all worked together, studied together, and worked together, and had a small company together where we created our own work, and then just would decide, you know, let's go to Vancouver and do street theater in Gastown. So that's what we did, which was great. It was very freeing in terms of just really explore. And street performance it's an incredibly difficult skill. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about being a performer and serving audience and audience relationship by doing street theater. It was some of the toughest training I've ever had as a performer. But
people might just scream at you or physically confront you. It sounds like it's guerrilla theater, right? You'll just stop on a street and start to perform.
Yeah, we would just set up in different locations, and you know, we had a series of things that we had in our back pocket, but then a lot of it was just improvisation. And you know, those kinds of skills as a performer for me have been really fantastic. I use the idea of clown and mask and improv in all of my work. Even if I'm looking at classical text, I'm looking at it from those places of what does that mean in my body? How does it feel in terms of movement? What would the clown do? I always ask that. yeah, I was just really, really interested in exploring theater. I read somewhere when I was young
Yes.
that Brecht was so inspired by street performers and puppeteers, and Shakespeare and Brecht were a lot of the early plays that I read. My foster father was very interested in Shakespeare, and so I got in my mind that I really needed to experience and play around with what that relationship with audience is. It's you know, it's like having a kid audience. You have to be truthful and honest, and there has to be something that engages someone and pulls them in long enough to stay for more than a minute or two. It was fantastic. It was great.
Do you think even when you're doing plays with the fourth wall, so a traditional play like A Mother Courage, or if you're doing Lear or something like that, Winter's Tale, are you still thinking about the relationship with audience, even if they're hidden behind the lights, the footlights and all of that?
Absolutely. I feel that, well, I'm not, okay, so what I feel is most important is that if I am in my sense of play, and if I am connecting to myself, I also have I mean, we can talk about this later too, but I have a spiritual there's a spiritual part to my process that I as an actor that I access. But I feel that if I am connected and present, really, really present in my world, then that relationship will take care of itself. Because if I'm open and engaged in my work in a sense of play and connected to playing, to my task, and that's where the clown work comes in for me, then the action of that play will help to create that relationship with the audience that I'm seeking. I can't try to make that relationship happen. If I reach out to them or try to bring them in, then it's not organic, and I'm not going to be successful. So it's a difficult thing for me to describe, but it's always been my process. And I learned a lot about that in street performance, because, and silence, the power of silence and stillness is the other thing that I also learned. And I know this is so weird, so it probably sounds really weird, but I had a job when I was like 1978, right? Long time ago, being a mime in a storefront window for a shoe shop in Yorkville. And I had my white face on, and then
like real, like mime, like,
yeah, real. Well, the idea was that it was kind of I would pretend that I was still, completely still, and then every now and then I would move. And what I learned about the power of stillness on the stage by doing that. It was so interesting. Again, some of my best training crazy, I know, but came from learning how to be active in stillness. And
I believe you 100%. I'm totally, I believe in the power of stillness and silence on stage.
Yeah. And you know, the irony is that I learned more about that by being a mime in a window for a shoe store in Yorkville.
How long were the shifts?
You know, it was so long ago. I really actually don't remember.
Okay.
I don't think that they were like.
I worry for you as the performer, like how long would it have been? Yeah. Do you have a clown character? I know so many people who do clown have a character. Do you have a clown character?
So I do. I studied clown with Richard Pachinko on top of Tony Montanaro. Tony was more that sort of European, Italian clown style, and like Jacques Tati and a lot of those kinds of a lot of those guys. And then when I met Richard, I was really interested in his methodology. I'm one of several that doesn't call Richard Pachinko's methodology of teaching based on indigenous practice, although that's what he claimed. But I did find a lot of things that worked really well for me in that training. So I studied with Richard a lot, and then I continued on that training with John Turner, who is an amazing teacher up on Manitoulin Island. And
Mop and Smoot, right? Mop and Smoot.
Yep, Smoot. And I've found that, you know, what's really helpful with clown training is just getting you just get out of your head, you know, like just get out of your head and really learn to follow deep impulse. So early on, my clown character's name was Ginger. And I haven't done sort of a straight clown for a while, but I am getting back into that with Michaela Washburn, and I are working on a project together and with John Turner, and we're excited about where that might go, that takes us back into what I would call the purity of pachinko style clowning.
And so so Ginger was the original clown. Is there a different clown now, and how has your clown changed?
You know, I'm about to discover that actually with this new project with
Really?
Michaela, and I'm excited to. We call ourselves the Buffalo Jills, just because we're exploring the buffalo and what that relationship is to our land, and so I have a feeling that not having done sort of that purity of clown for a while, that something will emerge. I'm just not quite sure what it is yet.
Well, I will ask again sometime. What is
Yeah.
it? I somehow did not know that some of your early success was as a puppeteer, like quite major. You have a Gemini in puppeteering. You were a Muppeteer. You were on Mr. Dress Up, which for someone my age is like,
Yeah.
it's like you're a Beatle or something. I'm curious about where the puppeteering comes from. Can you tell me a bit about that early period where you had so much success?
You bet. So my mother was a doll maker, and she made soft sculpture dolls. She did pretty much everything with her hands. She was very creative. She was also a math teacher, high school math teacher for the remedial kids. And she looked at math through the idea of artistic expression. So she was quite successful in doing that. But her dolls were really quite incredible. So, she'd often talked about dolls having souls, and so and she was really actually good at manipulating the dolls and bringing them to life. And so I look back now and I go, oh, that's probably where it all started. So I have my mother to thank for that. But I was, you know, in some of my original mask and clown and circus training and mime training, the idea of corporal manipulation with the body and the precision of that is really the basis to being able to bring a puppet to life. The precision of the manipulation is what breathes breath and life into a puppet. So a lot of that training was interchangeable, which was really great. And then I had decided that I was going to move back to BC, and I was out in Vancouver, and sorry, the other phone.
Okay.
I forgot to turn the other phone on.
It's all good.
I was in Vancouver and not in the early 80s and not finding work and not having a great time of it when some of my friends phoned me and said, Jim Henson's coming to town in Toronto and he's doing some training and you should come back. And I did. And within a week I had a job and I was training with Henson's team and doing a lot of background puppeteering on Fraggle Rock and the Jim Henson Hour, and that stumbled and led to more and more things. So auditioned for Granny and got the role. Was really excited to be working with Ernie. He was an amazing man and just so beautiful to be able to play a character like Granny who really got in there with the kids and played with them and sang songs and dressed up and, you know, did all the things that I hope to be as a grandmother if I make it there.
Wow, that's amazing. And you won a Gemini for, is it called Wampool? No, what it?
Well, Wampa's World was a series out of Montreal. It was about a walrus that was voiced by Lauren Cardinal, and I played Sika. Sika was one of the rabbits, and so there was a group of us that won a Gemini for our collective performance in a children's, as a children's ensemble in a children's television series.
That's amazing. First of all, so cool. Did you think then at that point, oh, I'm going to be a puppeteer forever? Or did you have a desire to do other things?
I've always, actually, early on, I remember when I first came to Toronto, Tarragon Theatre used to have kind of what's now the, Theatre Ontario Showcase or Equity Showcase now, whatever it's called. Tarragon had a kind of a similar thing where there was a table of rows of artistic directors and a few casting directors, and young artists could come in and do a bit of material. And I remember I was so excited I got a slot, and I went in and I did a bit of clowning, and then I did some Shakespeare, and I remember the response was like, you got to pick one. You got to just focus on one and pick one. And I left going, but I can't. I just, even when I tried, I just couldn't, because there was such an interesting intersection. I think I'm a better artist. I think I'm a better classical actor because of my musicianship. And I think I'm a better singer songwriter and musical performer because of my ability to do classical text. And when I approached not only directing, and now as a director, I understand music, I understand visual image, all of those things helped me to become the artist that I am today. So I'm thankful I didn't listen to anybody, but it was harder, and it took a longer period to really develop a career.
That's interesting, because here's what I see. Yeah, puppeteer, mime, clown, singer, songwriter, vocalist, playwright, actor, director. Which one, and what am I missing from the list?
Mom. Single parent.
Yeah. The mom of daughters. This is a big one for us. When you were in Maine, you're learning to be a clown and a mime, and you're doing all that physical theater. Where's the decision to move? Is it Toronto first? Is it Toronto that you go to first?
Yeah, well, my visa ran out. So I actually toured around after I finished the program at the Celebration Mime Theatre, which was on and off for about a year. I traveled around with two of my fellow students who had a small Volkswagen van and a puppet show in the back of their van. And so I traveled around New England and sort of the Eastern Seaboard for a while with them, helping them with their show. And then I decided that I would move to New York. And I didn't last in New York very long. I was 18. I wasn't sure what to do with myself, and I just couldn't feel comfortable there. And then just when I started to feel that it might work out, my visa ran out and I had to return to Canada. So I literally just took a bus to Toronto and landed here on the day that Charlie Chaplin died, and decided that was, I don't know, some kind of sign. Yes. Oh, and I don't know what it was. So I stayed in Toronto. I did go back to BC for about a year and a half because I do miss the mountains, and I miss the air, and I miss the trees and the smell of the tamarack. And but at the time in the early 80s, there really wasn't much there for me. So coming back to Toronto was the best choice for me.
Did you have people in Toronto? Like, did you call someone from New York and say, I'm coming, can I stay with you?
I didn't. No, I got off the bus and I went to the Salvation Army women's residence, and then things just sort of fell into place. Stayed there for a while, found a room in a house, and just started developing relationships and going to the library a lot. I spent a lot of time in the library when I first got here.
Are you a voracious reader to this day?
I am. Yeah. I was kind of blown away. As I was just blown away with the library here. I mean, you could read any play you wanted to read. There were books on mime and Jean-Louis Barlot and all these people that I was like, I had this voracious appetite to get to know there was a woman named Agna Enters who I was really interested in. She was a female mime, a European mime, and there's a book on her in the library. I was like, what? So, it was just a really great place to be. That was safe as well, but also gave me something to really focus on when I first arrived here, because I really wasn't quite sure what I was going to do.
Yeah. What was your first job then, sort of theater performance job in Toronto? How did you get it?
Well, that came out of the training. So I spent some time with the Mime School Unlimited was a program run by Ron East, and there was some pretty incredible teachers that came through that program, like Dean Gilmore and oh, now I can't think.
That's what happens,
right? Yeah, really interesting instructors. And so out of that training, Ron also created a small sort of company. And so we created some work together and we toured schools. And so in Toronto, those were some of my first performance experiences. And then after I left that company, I worked with Jerry Franken, and in Cascade Theatre, we did a tour. We did a 6-month tour of, was it 6 months? Yeah, it might have been. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Of a Thompson Highway play called Annie and the Old One, which was an adaptation of a book that Thompson was commissioned to write. So I went right into touring children's theater TYA shows. And again, really great training, really hard work, but great training.
Yeah, touring is incredibly hard, those children's tours, and then like that's a slog. It feels like it's a rite of passage for artists, though.
Yeah, I don't remember enjoying all the travel, but I do look back and recognize the importance of that part of my career and all the things that I learned from it.
I want to ask you about 2012. I was reading something where you were almost considering, well, I want to talk about other parts of your career, but almost considering giving up, or maybe your career had dried up in some ways. I don't know if that's a fair way to say it. You were thinking about putting out resumes for real jobs. Yes, is this true?
Yeah, there was a couple periods in my life where just as we all do, I just hit one of those years where it was like, boom, boom, boom. Like there was just one thing after the other. And like my life just sort of took a very interesting turn and things kind of fell apart, and a lot of what I had in my life that was stable wasn't there anymore, or it wasn't stable anymore. And I was also a new single parent and was trying to figure out how I was going to do that. I'd been on panels and I'd heard people say, and I've had male directors tell me that I shouldn't be in the business as a single parent. And so I was contemplating all of those things. But the irony of that is, well, the universe is great if you listen to it and have a good relationship with it. But I probably sent out about 40 resumes, and I think I got 3 interviews. And then when I went into the room, I was with like 28-year-old master's students who were looking for work too, and I was like, I'm never going to get this job. So, but there's also been people who have come forward and really helped me a lot. And one of those was Peter Hinton, who
He reached out in 2012, right? And he asked you to come to the NAC, National Arts Centre of Canada, and become an artist in residence. Is this right?
It was actually before that. So he was reestablishing the ensemble at the NAC, and he was looking for a group of artists to come and be part of the acting company. And so I think that was 2008, maybe. and 2008, 2009, and asked me if I wanted to be a part of the company. And I said yes. I talked over that with my daughter. First, she was probably 10. But we had a conversation about it. I said, this is what it means for both of us. And so she agreed, and off we went. And it was a fantastic experience on so many levels. Those stages are beautiful. All the different kinds of varieties of stages that I've worked on, from, outdoor, like Fourth Line, that kind of stage gives you something very specific and very wonderful. I've worked in, high school and elementary school gymnasiums. That's another thing. And then there's those large stages in our mainstream theaters across Canada that give you something else. And the stages at NAC are quite beautiful. They have such an intimate quality, and yet in order to be present in the space as an actor, it just requires something different of you. And so I learned a lot. I also I had been working with the Turtle Gals Performance Ensemble for a while, which is a very specific way of working. And then suddenly I found myself with, some pretty incredible peers that were from across the country, and a much different requirement of me as an actor. And I really had to step up. I had to, which is not to say that Turtle Gals didn't have a certain kind of demand of me as well. It was just a different ask.
Different muscles, right? Don't you think sometimes it's different muscles? So was the pinnacle of all of that work the Lear? It was the first Indigenous King Lear, is this right?
The Pinnacle was, was the end of my contract at the NEC, and marked the end of Peter Hinton's time there. But it was something that both him and August Schellenberg had been talking about for years. And so it was just, it was just such an incredible experience. It was just one of those things that I will never forget.
You played Cordelia and the Fool.
Yeah.
And tell me, can you tell us a bit about the experience? It was an all-star cast, yes? Who else was in the cast?
It was an all-star cast, like Lauren Cardinal, Craig Lauzon, August Schellenberg, of course, who played Lear, Monique Mojica, Tantu Cardinal. Just a plethora of absolutely incredible Indigenous artists, some who had Shakespeare training, some who had not. All of us, even if we'd had Shakespeare training, came from different avenues, different doorways into the text. So, finding common ground and commonality was an interesting exploration for sure. We were guided by Algonquin elders, Algonquin community. We were on their land. We followed their protocols to the best of our ability. And had a lot of questions to ask. Some got answered, some didn't. How do you put a group of Indigenous actors together who come from a number of different nations and have different protocols? How do you work together? How do you all get along? How do you decide on protocol around drums, the use of drums? It was just an incredible experience. Tough, hard. Difficult, challenging, but one of my most favorite memories is one night there was a number of Algonquin youth who had come from the reserve, and as the Fool, I have a great opportunity to sort of be up and out a lot, and there was a section of them sort of up and to audience left, and I saw them early on in Act One, and it was a magical experience to have them see and recognize the costume elements and things that they recognize themselves. They recognize themselves and their culture on stage. It was very powerful.
How do you navigate protocols in work? I'm so curious about it. I guess we have some in white colonial theater, but I don't think to the extent. Would you agree?
would say that we're still figuring that out. And, you know, the challenge is that, again, like even if you're working on a project, and we've all been given different teachings, we've all been brought up in different circumstances. There, you know, 60 scoop and adoption and foster care have challenged the flow of that knowledge, and you know, the action of trying to regain that knowledge can be a bit bumpy too, in terms of who do you go to if your grandparents aren't alive, or, you know, all of those things that, you know, we're still dealing with today, and also, you know, guided by elders. So, for example, with Prophecy Fog, which was a play that I created with the theater center, I brought in Pauline Shirt and Sadie Buck to help with protocols, because the entire, you know, floor was covered in stones, and stones are sacred, and Pauline calls them the skin of Mother Earth. And I was taking them from the beaches and the walks I was on and putting them on the stage, and I needed to know how to take care of them. I needed to know how to treat them in a sacred way. And so our elders are there to also help us with that. But sometimes those questions can't be answered either. Like, as you know, the costume that I needed for that play needed to be white because there was projection on me, and it needed to be short-ish so that I could also move around as much as I did and crawl inside the rocks and cover myself in them. And as I looked at that whole show as a ceremony, you know, Pauline was saying, well, you need to wear a long ribbon skirt. And I was like, well, it's going to be hard for me to do what it is I am doing as a performer, and, you know, for the needs of the projection. So there's compromise along the way, and conversation and clarity that's essential and needs to take place. But I would say that every single play and every single situation probably needs to be looked at as a one-off in terms of the circumstances around that particular piece of theater or that particular need is going to be different. I'm hoping that we never come up with a book that says this is how it should be done, you know, because that's not
Prophecy Fog, say to Manitoba, to Winnipeg, would you reach out to elders there to deal with the play, or would the play live in its own space as a piece of theater now? Where do like, help me, guide me a bit about that?
You bet. So the play itself would live with the teachings that I've been given from Sadie Buck and from Pauline Shirt in terms of the actual piece. I've been given those instructions by Pauline in terms of how to take care of those stones, you know, how to honor them, how to make sure that they're clean, and how to prepare the space. But each community that I go into, in terms of how we engage with the community, how protocols around how artists need to navigate within the community, and protocols around how things are presented generally, I would always try to connect with someone who had that knowledge in that particular area, because there's the play protocol, and then there's the protocol around everything else that surrounds that. And
we've been, I mean, okay, so you're talking about a play about stones, which we would walk past them every day as white colonial settlers and not think much about them. Some people would, some people who are more spiritual, maybe more in touch with the land, the earth. What made you stop and think about stones and then start to create the piece?
Well, it you know, it was such a fantastic journey, because there was several intersections in terms of the creation of that. So it started because the theater center had created a residency program called the Tracy Wright Global Archive. So Tracy Wright was an incredible, fantastic artist. And one of the things that she talked about was you become a better artist and a better person when you put your feet on the land of others so that you understand them better, and then you understand yourself better. And the residency allowed me to go anywhere in the world that I wanted to go and ask one question. And I really have always wanted to go to Iceland. And so my first proposal that I sent in was, I want to go to Iceland and I want to ask this question, which was, why, since I was 6, have I always wanted to go to Iceland? But then there was just this little tap on my shoulder all the time. And I had been doing some research on sacred spaces, primarily stone and pictographs and petroglyphs that had been destroyed, vandalized. And I was trying to contemplate what would make someone do that. What is in someone's heart and mind to want to destroy something like that? Not just even in Canada and the States, but all over. And I had read on the internet about a place called Giant Rock in the Mojave Desert. And this rock just kept going, come on, Chait, you don't want to go to Iceland. You want to come and visit me. So I changed at the very last minute my application, and I was accepted, and I went to Giant Rock in the Mojave Desert in the middle of nowhere. And I brought my daughter there in August. It was 42 degrees Celsius, and it was insane. But what that connected to through a series of events, when my mom passed on, she was into the occult, or what they called the occult at the time, in the 60s and the 70s. And there was this little book that she had in her bookshelf, along with every National Geographic that she kept, this little book. And inside the book, in her writing, was an inscription that said, "We come from the stars. We are star people." So this was from a woman of Scandinavian ancestry, Finnish and Swedish, and I don't know what else, who wrote these things in this book. And I had the book I don't have it anymore, but I had it for the longest time, and it always was in the back of my mind. So an elder that I worked with in Manitoulin Island, his name was Sam Ozamek, I asked him one day what he thought that meant. And he said, well, in the way that he talked, you need to spend some more time with rocks and stones. And I was like, okay, what does this have to do with that? But through all of the research I did, and the more I talked to Sam and the more I talked to other people, I realized that there was actually a pretty big connection between stones and stars. And that, so much of our earth is really stardust, and a lot of our stones, and potentially this 7-story high boulder in the middle of the desert that is made of pure granite. Where did it come from? I don't know, but I was able to weave those stories together with the help of Franco Boni, who was my director and what I call on my feet dramaturg, and with the help of Brian Quirt, and we were able to weave and tie all of those things together. But it was really great to have, again, to be able to go to the elders and to talk about the story. I brought in people like Karen Recollet as well, who is an amazing academic at U of T, and does a lot of star study and cosmology from an indigenous perspective. And it was great to be able to connect in the research phase, academia, teachings, my own personal stories. Yeah, it was a really beautiful experience, and great for me too, because again, in terms of audience and stage stage spaces, we were in Melissa Joycom, who just won a Dora for the environmental design for that, created a very intimate space where we had an audience of 50 people sitting in a circle together, some on the floor, some in seats. And, they were literally a foot away from me. So the complete opposite to the NAC stage, great for me as a performer to be able to feel comfortable and present. That's really my thing as a performer is, am I present? Am I available and present? Am I open and present?
Have you ever dialed it in an 8-show week? Have you ever gotten off the stage and gone, Like I just dialed that one in, or
Yeah,
does that never happen?
yeah, no, it definitely. I think there's times where at least I have enough skill and training to even my dial-up performance is still pretty present.
Yeah.
But I can really feel the difference between me feeling really open and really connected and present and where I'm acting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
it's inevitable, right? Exhaustion, mental health, all those things. So I was interested in 2019. Now Magazine picked you as one of the theater artists in Toronto to watch, which is a great testament. As women of a certain age, I think that's a big deal. But look at Prophecy Fog. You directed Rope at Shaw. You acted in The Winter's Tale, and you directed the first Indigenous play at Soulpepper, right? Almighty Voice and his wife, Daniel David Moses, and he just passed away, right?
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really, I haven't spoken very publicly about that, but it's hard to know sometimes what to say. I what I incredibly excited about and so happy with was that I feel that we brought the notoriety to Daniel's work that he well deserved a lot earlier in his career. And which isn't to say that he didn't have his own notoriety, but I feel that we were able to really ramp that up a lot with this last production of Almighty Voice, and to really turn that play on to a lot of people who had not understood it or not cared to understand it or not wanted to engage before. So I was so happy. Just it's probably about 3 weeks prior that I had emailed Daniel, because he said, "So, Jani, what do you think you can? You think you can muster up some Dora awards or some Dora nominations?" So I emailed him. I said, "Well, Daniel, we got you 5, you know."
Yeah.
And it was a very short answer. I didn't realize that he wasn't feeling well, but a very short answer. He said, "Yeah, you did really well. Thank you very much." And that was his response. And then, really, literally about 3 weeks later, he had passed on. So, it's yeah, it's still hard for me to sort of contextualize the fact that he's not here to have those further conversations about the play, about the experience, and but Almighty Voice and his wife for me, it's one of my favorite plays. I think it's brilliant.
You had been in it in 1991 at the Great Canadian Theatre Company with Billy Morasti, right?
Yeah, we were the world premiere, and and it was a challenging experience for me because I was trying to figure out how the clown worked, and because of my clown training that was kind of specific, and then but really the requirement of the clown and the interlocutor was a slightly different play. So in 1992, when we did that, 91, 92, Daniel's play the interlocutor was not in our CMP an outfit. The text was slightly different. There was I mean, the basis of it was the same for sure, but there was some slight differences, and so we were trying to find our way of marrying the vaudeville and the clown genre, and yet the action of it. And I think we all struggled with that. I think we all struggled with how to find that, which was why when I left that production, I was like, I'm either going to be in this again because I really want to do it differently, or I want to explore something that hadn't occurred to me until after the run was over, or I want to direct. And so finally, several years later, I was able to direct, and I have Alan Dilworth to thank for bringing that to programming, and Wayne and all the folks at Soulpepper who agreed to follow through with that decision.
But the script was slightly different than what you.
Yeah, by the time it got to being published in 2001, I believe. can't remember when the first published version came out, and then he revised again before his second, the second time it was published. But there are differences in the script, yeah.
Great, very interesting. Okay, so here's a quote from you. Creative expression is as much a spiritual journey as a theatrical or musical one. And you talked just a little bit about it earlier, but tell me about how you combine or meld your spiritual life in terms of your practice.
Absolutely. So, you know, one of the things in terms of my own journey of trying to reconnect with Métis culture and indigenous values, and looking at creative expression at the same time. And you know, at a certain point, I would imagine that all indigenous cultures, or all cultures really, but all indigenous cultures around the world, there is no separation between artist and human being. So living is a very sacred, just being human and being in physical form is a very sacred experience. And it was actually Thompson Highway who said to me once that, you know, the way that he was taught is that we're spirits who enter physical form. That this is our school, and but we're spirits that come in and put on this cloak of a body, which is a different way of looking at it from we are physical form that look up. He's like, no, it's the other way around. So it made me start thinking about the intersectionality really of creative expression. So, you know, in a lot of indigenous cultures, there's prayer, singing, dancing, adornment, always working with your hands, those kinds of things. There was no separation between all of that. You know, we got up in the morning, we sang. We sang because it was not only prayer, but it was a really important thing to do, or it was great enjoyment. We danced for ceremony, we danced for healing, we danced for pleasure. And then somewhere along the line, the Industrial Revolution and a number of other things came along and separated this idea of artist and simply human being. So one of the things that also really struck me was when I left, going back to my foster father, one of the things that he said when he was like, okay, bye. He said, you know, no matter what you do, just live your life creatively. Like if you end up being a dentist, like do it creatively, just fall in love with your work and find the creativity in the work that you're doing. And that to me is the glue that connects my spiritual practice with my craft. So there is such incredible joy that I experience when I'm not in my head, not in my intellect, but really present in my body and in my being. And in a way, I hate the word channeling, but I'm not quite sure whether word to use at the moment, but when I am the conduit for that energy to come through my body using the storytelling format, then that is how the intersectionality of all of those things connect. And really, again, it also came out of my my desire to be an artist and an actor who was very present on the stage. I also had the great pleasure of studying with some masters. I didn't get into any of the theater schools that I auditioned for, but I had the opportunity to study with, not full-time, but whenever they came to Toronto, which was another great reason to be here in the 80s. Yoshi, those incredible masters were coming to Toronto to teach. And Yoshi Oida, Tadashi Suzuki, all like that kind of training was really about looking at ritual and in a way a spiritual consciousness into the skill and craft of being an actor. And I'm very, very thankful that I had that kind of training. It's been the basis of my craft and what I love to do and bring forward in anything that I do.
I'm so curious about directing something like Rope. at the Shaw, which is awesome. How do you bring, how is a play like that and how you direct it? How's your spiritual journey inform your work?
That's such a great question.
And it doesn't have to. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Does it work all the time? I'm thinking with the traditional English language canon of work when you touch it.
Yeah. It was really such a great opportunity for me to direct at Shaw. And when TC and Tim asked me if I'd be interested in directing that play, I actually kind of, not 100%, but kind of turned them down at first, because I thought, you know what, this is a very colonial mindset. It's a colonial world. It's not the kind of theater that I'm good at, or that, you know, that really like gets me super excited about pushing boundaries and stretching things. But the more I read the play, and the more I went back to it, the more I thought, actually, this could be lots of fun. This could really be lots of fun. And it was my learning curve, and my learning curve was working in a festival format and working with ensemble actors who, because the Shaw Festival, when you're directing there, you are handed a cast. You don't have that same kind of building of relationship and pre-agreement that you have when you audition or cast your own plays, where you go, you know what, I think we could work together. You know, that doesn't happen there. So my learning curve was how I learned a lot. Sometimes successful, sometimes not, but I know now how I would do things differently if I were ever back in that kind of situation. And I'm also, I think, I learned also a lot about the needs of a group of artists who are and actors, even though I had been one. I'd worked at Shaw and Stratford, but as a director, I love this idea of collaboration. So who was it that recently said that? Oh, I can't remember who that was. Was listening to a director the other day. They were talking about how, oh, it was Wayne. It was Wayne from Soul Pepper. She does an incredible amount of research and a lot of decision making and everything, and comes to the rehearsal hall with that, and then just puts it aside. And I was like, yeah, that's what I love. That's what I love about the process of directing. Is I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books. I listened, which was also something that Peter Hinton had passed on to some of us when we were when I took a class with him about directing. He's like, you have to know your world, you have to know those characters, you have to know everything about them, so that intuitively and inspirationally you can just respond. So I did a ton of research, and I felt like I had made a lot of decisions, but I also like to make those decisions and then put them aside, because I'm also a firm believer that my relationship with the actors that I work with is paramount. I need to know that we can play together, that we can find the action together, that we can, that I can push them together, that I can challenge them together. And yeah, I would, some of those things I would do differently. If I were back in that environment. I made some mistakes. I would frame things differently. I would use slightly different language. But all in all, the spiritual practice for me was to go home every night and to just sit with the imagery and to sit with the process and to contemplate how the next day should go and how things could be reframed. And so I was really involved in that process for me, on a daily basis and in the room, to really listen to that larger self, to that larger voice that comes through me sometimes, and to be guided in that way. I was very proud of the work that we all did. It was such an incredible cast, and and audiences seem to really love it. So
Now your daughter's is Tara Sky. Is that how you say? Is it Tara? Yes, it's Tara.
I say Tara, but
Tara, thank you.
she'll answer to either.
Tara, I have a Tara in my life too. So she announces to you in grade 8 that she's going to audition for Etobicoke School of the Arts. Is this how it happens, or did she always let you know that she was going to be a performer?
At a certain point, she'd actually decided that she didn't want to be in the arts. I think it was part of the struggle that she saw me go through. She talked about different possibilities in terms of, she loves hairdressing, she loves working with hair. There was other things that she contemplated. And then one day, around that time, she came home and she said, I think I have to be an artist. I think like an artist. And I'm not sure I can find myself a place in the world if I think like an artist. I don't know where else to go than to be in an artistic field. Those weren't the exact words she used, but it was that realization, and I was like, what? That's incredible. So, and she's also been very clear that, or working her way towards that, because I was like, okay, you got to do this and you got to do that. You got, you got to do this. She's like, Mom, I'm going to do this on my own. And so one of the best coaches around is Maggie Hushalak. And she said, I want to work with Maggie. And Maggie helped her and coached her with her auditions for ESA and also for NTS. And she did that all outside of me being involved, which in hindsight was a really good idea.
So she went to Etobicoke School of the Arts,
yeah.
And then, to make matters worse or better, depending on your, she auditioned for the National Theatre School of Canada, got in, and graduated recently, right?
Yeah, graduated in May of 2019.
Oh my God!
And then was supposed to be at the Stratford Festival. She had been in rehearsals for a month.
And were you supposed to be there with her? Did I make that up?
No, I was going to be there too. Yeah, I was in the late opener. I was in the Res Sisters, and so I was going to arrive in June, and she had arrived in February. Right. She was there in February, and already a month and a bit into rehearsals. So we would have been sharing a space as well, living together in Stratford. Which is what I miss the most, what both of us have talked about this, and what we miss the most is just that creative expression that we have in the room, in the rehearsal room together. It's a thing that we've identified that we miss the most during this time. And it would have just been really lovely to be in Stratford with her at the same time.
Yeah. Have you acted together before?
Yes and no. So yes. Tara was actually involved in one of the productions at the National Arts Center that I was in, called Nativity, and she was the angel. So she was there with me anyway. They were looking for children performers. Rather, we were living in a hotel. I was like, can Tara audition? And they said absolutely. So Leah Cherniak directed that show, and Tara auditioned, and so she was on stage, shared the stage with me in that show at the NAC. So very early on, sort of had this great experience of being on that beautiful stage. Yeah. And also in terms of my theater company that I co-founded with Monique Mojica and Michelle St. John, called Turtle Girls Performance Ensemble, she really grew up in that environment. And while not officially in any of our shows, on a broad scale, she was very much a part of the process, in the rehearsal process, in the producing process of things, and also in workshops and other things that we did. So she really grew up definitely in the backstages of theaters. The basement of Buddies and Bad Times. What a great theater to bring your kid to, like very kid friendly, set her up in the basement with a little place to sleep. And
I know that's what you have to do, right? My kid too. It's like, yeah, at the theater. did you feel you had to honor what your father and mother, and I guess both foster and biological, that they were so encouraging of you pursuing art? Was there ever a moment where you didn't want to encourage Tara to pursue it, or did you feel you had to honor what had been the gift that had been given to you in terms of carte blanche to do that?
I have to be honest to say that there was a period of my being a parent where I was really overprotective. I lost my mother at a very early age. I think that created a fear and a trauma of me, of the anxiety of kind of messing up or losing her in some kind of way. And so I have a fantastic naturopath and a lot of really great elders in my life and healers who I go to. And all of them were encouraging me to kind of loosen up as a parent a little bit and just allow Tara to find some joy in her life, and reminded me that the most important thing about parenting was to find a way to make your child experience joy. And when I took a breath and really realized that that was the most important thing, and really started just encouraging Tara to be who she was and helping her to try to explore what it was that she wanted to do, there was this incredible shift in our relationship. And which was kind of around the time when she realized that she really thinks like an artist, and therefore this is what I want to do. But I needed the guidance of some other healers to help me and to remind me that that was really the most important and the best thing that I could do for her, was just to say, what makes you happy? Where do you find joy? My daughter's an incredible poet. She kind of lost the exercise of that at NTS. The schedule there is pretty intense, and the poet's mind requires a bit of space, but she's getting back. I'm so happy she's getting back into it and writing again, and finding the space for all of those things and getting back into that. But yeah, to really have her happy was the most important, the most important thing I could do as a parent.
Nice. I like that very much. You as a writer, maybe not just a playwright, I know you're a songwriter. Have you been writing your whole life, Jani, or how does that all work for you?
I haven't, actually. I think one of the reasons why I went into mime was that I wasn't very good at speaking and articulating for myself. I could express myself through song. I could express myself through singing. I could express myself through movement. I don't call myself a dancer. I call myself a mover. I was very good at doing that, but I wasn't so great at speaking. And writing, I felt, was an extension of that. I felt really self-conscious about my writing and how I could articulate myself. It really wasn't. I'm trying to remember actually what started me on that path of writing. But I had an opportunity to jump into that again through the theater center. When David Duclos ran the theater center, I had an idea for a piece, and I applied to the Under the Umbrella program, I think it was called. And David was in support of the project. And so I was just like, okay, let's do this. And it was it gave me the courage and the opportunity to just explore what it would mean to actually articulate my thoughts and my views through text, which I had never done before.
How hard or easy was it to start writing?
it was really hard, actually. I remember days where I just felt so incompetent, and everything I tried to write felt really awful and bad. And David was very patient. He was good at what I really appreciated about his vision on things was, again, that intersection of multidisciplinary work. He was very good at articulating how the action of those things coming together can work and live side by side and with each other, and to, you know, bring a story forward. But it took me, I would say, a good, and even with Turtle Gals, because I did a lot of writing with Turtle Gals as well, we worked, again, in a much different way. We worked a lot sort of using Muriel McGill's story weaving process, and following in the footsteps of Spider Woman Theatre, which is a very particular way of working as well. Very particularly different dramaturgical process too. But that was really a great experience as well, just to sort of, you know, realize in the writing process that structure can be pretty much anything, really. I mean, there is a Western, what I call a North American Western construct. It wasn't until I started realizing that I could incorporate even mime and mask work and clown work in my writing. And so that came as a result of a book that I found called The Masks of Judith Thompson, which was a book of essays that were written about Judith, or there was one that she wrote herself. And she was actually talking about how she started writing. And she started writing as a student at the National Theatre School, who had taken a mask course. They had done a mask course, and then they were asked to write a monologue based on the exploration in the mask. And I was like, oh, I totally understand that. Oh, that, I can do that. So I was really thankful to, that was the thing that really helped me unlock my process, was reading that essay about Judith's first intersection with writing.
She did one of my artist talks in May, in the dark days of May, and talked about this exact story. So everything is coming full circle.
Yeah, it was instrumental for me in terms of going, oh, I understand that.
Compare Turtle Gals for me with Paper Canoe, your most recent theater company. How are they the same? How are they different? Tell me about Paper Canoe. I'm interested.
You bet. So I would say that Turtle Gals, because it was collective creation, the process for writing was much different. And because Muriel directed a lot of our shows, with the exception of the last one, The Only Good Indian, that Yvette Nolan directed, had a very particular creation process and stylistic methodology, and in it, I hate to use the word genre, but it has its own kind of feel. You know, that kind of work has its own kind of feel. So when Turtle Gals, I was left with the company, and the board and I decided that what we would do is to close Turtle Gals and leave it as a legacy, as opposed to have me try to, you know, recreate a new ensemble or change the mandate of the company, that we would just close it and leave it as the legacy that it rightly should be. So when I started Paper Canoe Projects, I was, well, really it was a vehicle for me to produce and write my own work, and to explore how the multidisciplinary aspects of and group of skills that I had that I could explore and experiment with how those relationships might work. All of the things that I had been building up to till then. And also to really utilize then the idea of Richard Pachinko's baby clown or work through mask, and that concept that Judith Thompson had written about in her essay. How could I create work that used that mask as a generating tool for character, for story? And so in the early stages of my first play, A Side of Dreams, I brought in John Turner, who helped me generate a lot of material.
Sorry, what does that mean? Are you putting commedia masks on, or what kind of mask? And are you acting things out and recording them? Can you talk to me a bit about that?
So Richard Pachinko's baby clown workshops require, part of, it's not require, but it's part of his methodology is that you create a series of masks, each one coming from a different direction. You make those masks with your eyes closed after going through what I call visualization improvisation. So it's a lot of visualization. It's improv, but it's using the tools of visualization. You go through a series of 6 masks. So east, west, south, north, south, below, below, above, above, to create your clown character. And your clown character is a combination of a mask has both innocence and experience. And so you explore all of the sides of the mask and you put all those masks together to create, to learn who your clown is. So in the case of generating material for A Side of Dreams, one of the things that became clear to me was that, and with John, was that my central character fell into the world of the dream catcher. So it was very much like an Alice in Wonderland experience. And therefore we realized that aerial hoop would be the best sort of way to actually visualize that in a theatrical form. And when Heiza, who's the main character, falls into that world, who does she meet? And so, and I was exploring what it meant to be silenced as a woman, as an indigenous woman, as a woman. So really, literally no voice at all. And so to explore what kind of characters or ancestral characters that she meets inside the Dreamcatcher, we used Richard Pachinko's methodology to create masks for those characters. So for example, one of the characters that came out in a mask was a character called Fogman Giant. And John helped me take the mask through all of that process. And out of that, Fogman Giant emerged as a character and therefore an important character in the play. And yeah, and it was so fantastic. Yeah. And it also
make 6 masks, like, so you're in studio making masks and then you use them in the creation of monologue and text and character?
Pretty much, yeah. So with A Side of Dreams, I didn't make 6 masks. I only made three masks. So we borrowed from the methodology that Richard has created for his baby clown training. We borrowed the ideas of it. I didn't take myself through the whole 6 masks, but I did make the masks in that kind of visualization, improvisation way, and generated pages and pages and pages of material and story and character development as a result of, playing with the masks. As you're sculpting the story, though, and going through a dramaturgical process, what I love about the material that's generated is a lot of it is metaphor. A lot of it is this beauty, the imagery is so rich that comes up, and it, as a dramaturg then of the piece, or a way of looking at sculpting the writing process, then you can look at the text both figuratively or metaphorically and say, okay, I did this improv, and I'm trying to remember now. So Fogman Giant was in my improvisations, was and this is the beauty of it too. And this is again where I go, wow, there's a spiritual element to this, because Fogman Giant was a sea man. Like, he, in my improvs, he, his job was to drive the boat through the fog, which is why he called himself Fogman Giant. And then, doing some further history on my, and research on my, Scandinavian ancestry, I came across a picture of an ancestor who kind of looked exactly like Fogman Giant, with this beard and like the sea cap. And I was like, there's really uncanny, interesting intersections that are.
Yeah, you kind of can't believe, it would not be logical that those things are not somewhere out in the spirit world.
Yeah, and I think what happens as writers is that sometimes we get so caught up in the craft of writing. Now, somebody like Daniel David Moses was brilliant at that. Like, he could, because of his training too as a poet, he could pull those words out of and string them together and make them so exquisite, whereas I don't have that kind of training. So what I find really beautiful is that I love getting out of my head when I'm writing. I go to my body. Oh, it's a really quick story. I'll try to make it quick, because I know we're probably running out of time. But when I did spend time with Sam Ozamek, he was a medicine person and a devout Christian as well. He would have his eagle feather in his hand, and he would, pray to Mother Mary, but knew his medicines really well. And I asked him one day, I said, how do you diagnose people? Like, how can you tell what's going on in their bodies in terms of health wise? And he said, well, your bodies are kind of like a book. And I just turn the pages and I read the book. And that phrase has really stuck with me, because I understand now more what that means. Our bodies are our books. We're all at one point part of oral culture. We memorized on a different level. We retained information on a different level than we do now. It's in our DNA. It's in our muscle memory. Like ancestral stories, all of those things are inside this beautiful book that we have. And what I love about Yoshi's work and Richard's work and David Smuckler's work is that all of those skills and all of that training allow you to find a way to go into the book and pull out the stories. And that's what I love about writing now, is that I'm not afraid of it anymore, because I know that inside this beautiful book I have right here, there's probably a million stories that I could bring out. That I just needed to give myself permission and validation that I have stories that are worthy. First of all, that's a whole other story, but that my stories are worthy, and that they're just kind of floating around inside this beautiful body and this beautiful spirit of mine. And I have tools now where I can go and retrieve them and bring them out. And I don't feel so conscious about whether this word is the right word or that word is the right word anymore. In the beginning of the creation of a new work, I'm like, let's just throw spaghetti against the wall,
Let's stick. I wanted to ask you, you're 20 years now on the diversity committee at ACTRA, which is the Association Union of Canadian Television and Film Actors. I am curious if you can talk a bit about how things are better, different. We're at such a crossroads now with anti-Black racism, with looking at BIPOC, indigenous issues. Where do you fall in all of these things that are going on right now and swirling?
Yeah, that's such an interesting conversation. So, so I've just left my volunteer position at ACTRA after 20 years. Uh, I stood on the soldiers. I stood on the shoulders of some pretty incredible women before me. Rita Deverell and Brenda Camino and Sandy Ross and many others um, who I watched and do some pretty incredible things. Like Sandy Ross in her time as president at ACTRA Toronto, the first Black woman, the first Black woman president of ACTRA Toronto, did some pretty amazing things and was really, really about inclusivity and, or what I like to call intersectionality. And so again, my involvement with the diversity committee and as the diversity advocate at ACTRA Toronto came out of another time with Sam, where I was kind of complaining to him that I couldn't find auditions. I was, when I first started out in Toronto, I was in an ethnic file. Like I didn't have a file of my own at my agency. I was in the ethnic file with all the Asian actors and South Asian actors and Black actors, and I was complaining to Sam, and he just turned to me in the way that elders do sometimes and said, well, what are you going to do about it? And so Heather Allen, who was involved in ACTRA at the time and a good friend of mine, said, you should get involved in the union. Then if you really want to make some change, you have to make sure that there's a space at that table for you. And if you're not being invited, then find a space at that table. And she was right. So there was a shift in the early 1990s in terms of inclusivity in the screen-based media in Canada, because the Canadian Broadcast Act was changed and it was mandated. It was mandated that there be more inclusive stories. And as a result of that mandate in the Canadian Broadcast Act, in the 1990s, a number of new productions sprung up and were more inclusive. And then the industry resorted back, and we lost the momentum that we had, which was really, really hard to experience. It was slow and painful. There were so many amazing people trying to break down that thick brick wall. But when you're dealing with an industry that is based on power and privilege and those who are afraid to lose their jobs and the idea of scarcity and the competitiveness of the business, I feel in a lot of ways that the wall just got thicker for a while. It didn't mean that we didn't stop trying to bang it down, but it did feel at times that the incredible work that so many of us were doing, it really felt like we were spinning our wheels. And then I'd walk into an audition room and I'd start to see more and more people of color or some indigenous actors. I started to see, actors living with disabilities get a role here or there. And there were very small incremental changes, but all of them added up to something that felt like there was movement forward. I wish we could have done more. I wish we could have done what's happened now, which I equate to the fact that the pot of boiling water has been boiling on the stove for a long, long time. And recently the lid just finally blew off. And I'm so thankful. I didn't know in my lifetime whether I would see that lid blow off, but I'm experiencing it now and I'm super grateful. We have a lot of work to do still. Just because that that lid is blown off doesn't mean that any of us know how to actually make this work.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and substantive change has to happen, and we're not even sure when we can all go back to work to try to enact change, right?
Yeah, I mean, the blessing is that this is now an opportunity for deep discussion, for potential disagreement. In the last little while, I've been brought into a number of circles where it's like, okay, let's figure this out. And we're like, okay, like, how do we work together? How do we, especially since, when we're looking at inclusivity or intersectionality, all of us from different cultural backgrounds have different needs. We all experience racism in a different way. We all, there's things that trigger me may not trigger a Black actor. Our experiences are different. And so now we're just trying to find out what is the common ground that we can all discover together in terms of really being able to support a safe environment that is inclusive of actors being able to come to the work with their whole self. And I don't know I don't know what that is. I think I mean, I've been exploring it for a number of years myself, but I'm excited to see what that means when we have an opportunity to sort of really explore what that is. Now we're just in the conversation phase. But
Well, so I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it strikes me it's all actors being able to come to the work with their whole self. I think lots
yes,
of white actors and men have been able to do that for a long time. Would you
yep,
agree?
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think
Absolutely.
it's giving everybody that right.
It's giving everybody that right and recognizing the value of that artistically.
Yeah.
Even inside a directorial vision, I know it to be possible to have people be able to come to the work with their whole self and still work within the framework of a directorial vision.
Yeah. When I always start these talks, Jani, I think, how am I going to talk for an hour and 15 minutes? And then I get to about 45 minutes and I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to get it all in. And I didn't get it all in. I got close, but I know I have to let you go. I've gone 4 minutes over and I have to get to questions. Can I implore you to stay for a few more minutes to answer questions?
Absolutely.
You've been so amazing and so generous. And Lindy, I'm going to turn Jani over to you because I'm afraid I'm just completely monopolizing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we have a few questions here. So the first one is from Lynn, and she asks, Jani, can you chat a bit about the Res Sisters?
Yes, sure. So I've done the play a few times and was headed again to the thing that was beautiful about Thompson's exploration of that play is that the work was birthed, I guess, to a certain extent, and then further explored on the reserve through the Dubaj Theatre Company with a number of really amazing and powerful Indigenous women who, some with training, some without, who worked with Thompson to improvise, explore, I believe the original name of the piece was the Seven Sisters, I think, if I'm not wrong. But that there was a great collaborative process early on with Thompson in terms of having those women in the room. And you can really feel that in the writing. You can feel their energy, their voices, how they speak. So Thompson was able to craft a play that really had the spirit of those women organically intact in you know, in the energy of the play. And I think that's the thing that I love so much about it, is that I can feel those women. When I read the play again, I can see them, I can feel them. When I see the play, it was also, for me, a really pivotal time in my career too. So early on, when I had come to Toronto and I was trying to figure out what to do as an artist, and in the very early stages of sort of rediscovering who I was culturally, and I saw the Res Sisters and I went, I'm home. I just remember walking out of the theater and going, I'm home. So it was a very important piece of theater for me in my trajectory, and also you know, a moving piece of theater, and a great celebration for Thompson as a writer as well.
Thank you.
Great. Another question for Jani is, do you have any advice for young emerging artists in Canada?
I'm going to pass on the exact same thing my foster father said to me, and that is, no matter what you do, live your life creatively. And I know that sounds really a lot simpler than it is to try to execute, but finding the joy in what it is that you're doing is paramount. If there's no joy in, and love and passion, and I know that this has probably been said before, but I don't necessarily like the word passion. I find joy. If I don't have the joy in what it is that I'm doing, the play of acting, the play of this world that we live in, this creative expression that we live in, is so important. And if you're not playing, and the joy of, you know, like there's a couple of kids who live, and of course they've been home, like, and every day the parents are out in the backyard playing with them, and it's the most amazing thing for me to watch. And they're telling stories, and they dress up, and I'm like, that's the best actor's training ever. It's just to remind yourself how to play, and that inquisitiveness of improvising and playing as a child. That having been said, training is really, really important. So I, again, wasn't able to get into the schools that I wanted to get into. I auditioned for U of A and NTS and Studio 180, all those places, and I just, for a variety of reasons, never got into them. So I sought out masters, what I call masters, or people who really, I carved out my own training program. What training allows you, and I still train, I still take classes. I just finished an online class on directing. There's always something new to learn, always. But what the training helps, and has always helped with me, is to, you know, the first 5 plays that I ever did, sort of outside of mime and mask, and I'll just be honest with you, in every single one of those plays, I was a character that was raped. And had I not had some training to be able to go, that is the play, and this is my life, to be able to separate when I can turn my craft on, and when I can let it go and get on with my day. It was the craft of the training that helped me separate those things, and has been my saving grace in a number of instances where I've had to take on some pretty challenging roles or circumstances that characters were in. So just train for the rest of your life, but whatever you do, do it creatively.
I like that. I like that very much. I don't like that you were in 5 plays in the beginning of your career that you were raped. That's a larger patriarchal conversation for us to have at another point.
It is another conversation for sure. And I think we've shifted. You know, I don't think we're completely over that, but we've definitely shifted, which is good.
I agree. Other questions, Lindy?
Yeah, one last question is, Jani, you're so accomplished in so many areas of the arts. What stokes the fire of your inspiration?
There's two things that I do for myself. I need to be by water a lot. And I need to be in nature. I grew up in the mountains. It's the thing that fed me then, and it's still, even in the city, even, you know, sitting out of my backyard by my pear tree, really, it quiets my mind and reconnects me to this incredible presence in the world, and the energy and the power of nature. And just sitting on the grass sometimes and putting my hands on the earth it just does amazing things to me. I also had the great pleasure of, which I still continue to do, a man named Frank Bach, who I met at Stratford when I was there, teaches a class called Conscious Movement. It's a class where you hardly ever move. I mean, physically, the extraneous physical activity is not something that we do, but the depth of the movement that happens in the fascia inside our bodies is, in his classes, is just like nothing I've ever experienced before. And I find I come out of his classes and I'm like, I have to write, I have to do this. I've just got an idea for a poem. Yeah, the combination of those two things right now are the things that are keeping me going.
Amazing. I want to say that as you're talking, it is like we're watching a theater piece. The lighting behind you is changing. It is blowing my mind.
Oh, yes, I have. So the other reason why I love this room too, yeah, because I've got skylights here, and then yeah, the light shifts constantly.
It's gorgeous. And I think I'm now hearing the cicadas as well. Is that possible?
It is, yeah.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
the other beautiful thing about doing outdoor theater, and why I loved working for Shakespeare in the Rough and then Shakespeare in the Rough, two different iterations of that company. So when you're rehearsing outside too, and then you're performing outside, you know, we spent a lot of time inside. We don't spend enough time outside anymore. And that kind of relationship to nature, especially being in, you know, in an artistic expression, is it's just so magical. It's so fantastic.
Yeah. Well, for me and Robert, it's 30 years of working outside in the space where the play will happen, which I also think when I talk about Fourth Line, we're so lucky, right? No rehearsal hall, no having to go into the theater eventually and open it up. Like, we rehearse right where we perform.
Yeah, it's really quite a special process for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was playing Shylock in The Merchant of Venice in Withrow Park, and Sanjay had me do this very long walk at the very end for Act 5. So Shylock was always still present, but all like walking further and further away in the distance, so that Shylock was still a part of the story, but you know, the separation. And I'd be walking into the darkness and the bats would go, phoom, phoom, you know, like, I just love those kinds of things because it keeps it real and you're in the moment, and it's.
I have one last question and I'm going to let you go. You have played so many characters in the canon, both the indigenous canon, the English language canon, Mother Courage, Shylock, Cordelia, the list goes on and on. Is there a character or play you haven't done yet that's on the bucket list or the wish list?
Yes.
And if you don't want to put it out there, you don't have to tell me, but I am very curious when you've had access to so much work.
I was really lucky last summer to be able to take Paulina off my bucket list, because she's been on my bucket list for a while. And so, you know, being able to do Paulina and the Old Shepherd was just, oh man, that was just, you know, such an amazing dream come true. I'm just really excited about tackling Prospero in the Tempest. I really want to.
You've got to do it.
I want to play with that text and figure out what that means, and you know, not necessarily make it in an indigenous
But it's a spiritual
But
of
it's,
the
yeah,
earth and of the elements piece, right? Prospero is commanding all those things, or he thinks, or she thinks, or they think. All right.
yeah, just, and that relationship with control and what, and yeah, what does, like, what is that? I just, yeah, well, we'll see, you know.
Right. Let's put
We'll
it out
see.
there.
There's also Catherine in Henry VIII, because there's, which, you know, just got done at Stratford last season, but she has one of, I think, one of the most powerful speeches in the canon for a female. Yeah, I mean, the action in her speech and her plea, and yeah. Anyway, my
Okay.
wish lists.
Thank you for being so open and honest and generous. And I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you. I just, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, I have to say, by you right now in the best possible way.
And I really appreciate all of you who came and spent some time with us, because there's lots going on online right now. And if you've been in Zoom meetings all day, sometimes the last thing that you know, another relationship with the screen is like, but so thank you for those who came to join us, and I appreciate it.
And good luck with Buffalo Jills? No,
Buffalo Dills, yeah, we're in the very beginning stages of that, so it'll take us, but it just, Michaela Washburn's fantastic, and it's just so fun to kind of go full circle back to some of my initial training, and, you know, see what's there and what's changed, and really excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jani. Thank you to everyone. And hopefully we'll see everybody at the farm sooner rather than later.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Okay, be well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.